Anger rarely comes from the present moment alone. It is usually activated by emotional triggers stored deep in the subconscious. Psychology shows that what irritates us today is often connected to unresolved experiences from the past, such as feeling disrespected, ignored, or powerless. When someone behaves in a way that resembles those past experiences, the brain reacts automatically, as if the old threat were happening again. The human brain is designed to protect, not to reason first. When a trigger is activated, the amygdala takes control, sending the body into a defensive state before the rational mind can intervene. This is why anger feels sudden and uncontrollable. Understanding this mechanism is the first step toward emotional mastery, because awareness weakens the automatic response. Many people believe others caused their anger, but psychology clearly shows that anger is an internal reaction, not an external event. Two people can face the same situation, yet only one becomes angry. This difference lies in perception, emotional conditioning, and belief systems that shape how the mind interprets behavior. Triggers are often tied to expectations. When we expect people to behave a certain way and they fail to meet those expectations, frustration emerges. The mind perceives this as a violation, which then transforms into anger. Letting go of rigid expectations significantly reduces emotional volatility. Psychological research emphasizes that unmet emotional needs, such as validation or control, intensify anger responses. When these needs are fulfilled internally rather than demanded externally, emotional reactions lose their intensity. Self-validation replaces emotional dependency. Anger also thrives on identification with the ego. When criticism or disrespect feels like an attack on identity, the ego reacts defensively. Detaching self-worth from external opinions creates emotional freedom and reduces reactive anger. Another important factor is cognitive bias. The mind often exaggerates threats, assumes malicious intent, or generalizes isolated behaviors. These distortions fuel anger unnecessarily. Learning to question assumptions brings clarity and calm. Emotional triggers lose power when they are named. Psychology supports the practice of labeling emotions, as it shifts brain activity from emotional centers to logical ones. Simply recognizing this is a trigger can interrupt the anger cycle. Repeated exposure to triggers without emotional reaction rewires neural pathways. Over time, the brain learns that not every perceived threat requires a defensive response. Calm becomes the new default. Understanding triggers does not eliminate emotions, but it gives control. Anger becomes a signal rather than a command, allowing conscious choice instead of impulsive reaction. Cognitive psychology teaches that emotions are shaped by thoughts, not events. The same situation can feel neutral or infuriating depending on the narrative the mind creates. When anger arises, it is usually because the mind has framed the event as unfair, disrespectful, or threatening. Reframing is the process of consciously changing the interpretation of a situation. Instead of assuming negative intent, the mind learns to consider alternative explanations. This simple shift dramatically reduces emotional intensity. One powerful psychological tool is cognitive distancing. This involves observing thoughts without identifying with them. Rather than saying, "I am angry," one recognizes, "I am experiencing anger." This subtle separation reduces emotional fusion. Catastrophic thinking is a major contributor to anger. The mind often exaggerates the importance of minor inconveniences, turning them into personal affronts. By questioning the actual significance of the situation, emotional reactions soften. Another key concept is locus of control. When people believe others control their emotions, anger increases. Shifting to an internal locus of control restores emotional authority and reduces blame. Psychology also highlights the role of self-talk. Harsh internal dialogue amplifies anger, while compassionate self-talk de-escalates it. The way the mind speaks to itself determines emotional outcomes. Expectation management is central to cognitive calm. Accepting that people are imperfect reduces frustration. Reality acceptance does not mean approval, it means emotional efficiency. Cognitive flexibility allows the mind to adapt instead of resist. Rigid thinking creates emotional tension, while flexible thinking promotes peace. The calmer mind is the adaptable mind. Reframing also involves redefining meaning. Instead of viewing challenges as personal attacks, they can be seen as opportunities for growth or practice in patience. Meaning shapes emotion. Over time, consistent cognitive reframing trains the brain to respond with neutrality rather than anger. Calm becomes a learned psychological skill rather than a personality trait. Emotional regulation is the psychological ability to experience intense emotions without allowing them to dictate behavior. Anger itself is not the problem, the lack of regulation is. Psychology shows that emotions are temporary biological signals, but when they are misunderstood or feared, they gain control over actions and decisions. Anger often escalates because the body enters a stress response faster than the mind can intervene. The nervous system interprets irritation as danger, activating fight or flight mode. Learning to calm the body first is essential, because a calm mind cannot exist in a dysregulated body. Breathing techniques are one of the most effective tools for emotional regulation. Slow, deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, signaling safety and reducing adrenaline. This physiological shift lowers emotional intensity before thoughts spiral into anger. Self-mastery requires awareness of early emotional cues. Anger rarely appears suddenly, it builds through tension, frustration, and mental resistance. Recognizing these early signs allows intervention before anger fully forms. Psychology emphasizes that resisting emotions strengthens them. When anger is judged, suppressed, or feared, it persists longer. Allowing the emotion to exist without acting on it causes it to naturally dissolve. Mindfulness strengthens emotional regulation by anchoring attention in the present moment. When attention stays with bodily sensations rather than mental narratives, emotional storms lose momentum. Awareness becomes the anchor of calm. Habits play a critical role in emotional control. Chronic stress, lack of sleep, poor nutrition, and overstimulation weaken emotional resilience. A regulated lifestyle creates a regulated emotional system. Self-compassion is often overlooked in anger management. Harsh self-judgment amplifies frustration, while understanding softens emotional reactions. The way one treats oneself internally determines emotional stability externally. Emotional pauses are a powerful psychological skill. Creating a deliberate pause between stimulus and response prevents impulsive reactions. This pause transforms anger into choice. Over time, consistent emotional regulation rewires the brain. Neural pathways associated with calm strengthen, while reactive patterns weaken. Self-mastery becomes automatic rather than forced. True self-mastery is not emotional numbness, but emotional leadership. The individual feels emotions fully without surrendering control. Calm becomes a practice skill, not a personality trait. Psychological detachment is the ability to remain emotionally centered regardless of external behavior. It does not mean coldness or indifference. It means freedom from emotional dependency. When others no longer control emotional states, anger loses its grip. Many people become angry because they unconsciously seek validation, respect, or control from others. When these expectations are unmet, frustration arises. Detachment removes these hidden emotional contracts. Personalization is one of the main causes of anger. Psychology shows that most behavior reflects internal struggles, beliefs, and emotional states, not intentional attacks. Detachment recognizes this and releases emotional reactivity. Letting go of control is essential for emotional peace. The desire to control outcomes, people, or perceptions creates constant resistance. Acceptance does not mean approval, it means emotional efficiency. Ego attachment intensifies anger. When identity is threatened, the mind reacts defensively. Detachment separates self-worth from opinions, criticism, and disrespect, restoring emotional balance. Boundaries are a core component of detachment. Healthy boundaries prevent emotional overinvestment. Not every situation deserves emotional engagement, and not every opinion deserves internalization. Observing instead of reacting creates psychological distance. When the mind becomes the observer, emotional intensity decreases. Awareness replaces identification. Detachment also involves releasing the need to be right. Arguments fueled by ego escalate anger, while humility dissolves it. Peace often requires surrendering unnecessary battles. Approval-seeking behavior increases emotional vulnerability. When validation comes from within, external approval loses importance. Emotional independence strengthens calm. Psychological detachment redirects attention inward. Instead of focusing on others' behavior, focus shifts to values, intentions, and inner stability. Control returns to the self. Over time, detachment transforms perception. Situations that once triggered anger become neutral observations. Emotional reactions fade as understanding deepens. Ultimately, inner freedom arises when reactions are no longer automatic. The psychology secret to never getting angry is not avoiding people, but freeing the mind from emotional captivity. Calm becomes the natural state when nothing external holds power over the inner world.